Greetings, Sportsketeers, and welcome to another episode of Mando Night Football. Joining us at our roundtable is me, Mike, and the usual crew, Ernie, Chris, and Joel. Guys, how was this episode this week?
Oh my God, what a contrast to last week's episode.
I wasn't on last week's episode, but I just want to get it out of the way real quick. I love Mrs. Frog. I thought she was great. I thought it was a fun episode. I understand the hate that a lot of people gave it. I personally still enjoyed it.
Oh, Mike, just because it totally clicked with me why you would like this. What did you think of the puppeteering costume, right? Because it was part puppeteering, right? And CGI.
Yeah. So Mrs. Frog, like as a costume, like that is really cool. I think it's a cool evolution of, the costumes that we've seen over the years in Star Wars. I mean, I don't want to say like it's movie quality, but like it honestly felt like it. Like this felt like something that could have popped, especially out of the sequel trilogy. What I know this episode's about the Heiress, but I just want to get this out of the way. One thing I didn't hear anybody mention is that we've always known like the Mon Cala and the Quarrens are from the same planet. Like they're kind of that ecosystem. And they're kind of the only aquatic animals that we have. So finally seeing like frogs, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like that would be like a third rung kind of sea creature alien. Does that make sense to anybody? No. Or am I just kind of going off?
It makes sense.
I wish you were on the other episode, in fact.
I just thought that was neat. Yeah, I 100% stand Mrs. Frog. I was joking with the guys over at the Imperial Senate podcast. We were talking about how does Mrs. Frog have only frogs? Which, if you guys don't understand that joke, don't Google it at work. So, anyway, going back, Chapter 11, The Heiress. We're just going to come out with it right up front. Bo-Katan, Kryze, right there. So did you guys expect her to pop up this early in the season? I know we all knew this was going to happen this season, but did you guys actually expect it to happen this early in the season?
Nope. Didn't expect it at all, which was a surprise. Something I mentioned in the last episode was that all the footage that we had been seeing in the trailer pretty much led up to these 3 episodes. And, that piece of footage that, Mike and I talked about the day the trailer got released was Sasha Banks hanging out in the corner. And I don't know why it didn't click when I saw the trailer, but as I was watching the episode, I was like, I think this is going to be a Mandalorian episode. As soon as I saw her on screen, there was just something that felt weird about it, right? Having such an impactful character that meant so much from the Clone Wars appear in live action. Now, she doesn't get the title of animated character going over to live action as, the first character to do that. That was Saw Gerrera. But, having her...
Wait. What about Boba Fett?
What?
The holiday special.
Right.
Okay, 42 years ago.
Yeah, holiday special.
I recant.
We're recording this the night of the Lego holiday special releasing on Disney Plus. So if you guys want us to cover that, let us know.
Give us a little wink.
Because man, I am dying to watch that actually.
But having such an impactful character come into this season so early, I think just fans were just going crazy because I think I yelled out yes as loud as I could in my living room by myself watching this episode. So
like a year ago, a friend of mine that works in production told me this was going to happen. So I had this spoiled for me a year ago. And let me tell you, that was the hardest thing to sit on for over a year. Like I had pictures and everything. And it was the hardest thing to not tell you guys. So
you kind of were saying it as doing your predictions as the episodes were going on. You kept saying, yeah, I think we're going to see, Bo-Katan.
I mean, okay, so kind of like going back, I didn't think it would happen this soon. Like I thought she would have been like a mid-season reveal before we went on a hiatus or something. So having her this early in the season was just kind of like, whoa. And then leading up to it, I like we talked about on the first episode, like I kind of understand now why they're not releasing the episode names before the episode comes out now, because like it's to preserve this kind of mystery and stuff. Like we didn't know this episode was called the Heiress until it aired. So I'm kind of excited to see where we're going to go next week, because like I said, that episode hasn't had any official information come out other than that Carl Weathers is directing it, which that's going to be interesting. But going back to this, like I didn't think she was going to pop up so soon in the season, and then Katie Sackhoff on Twitter was kind of vague tweeting like, hey, is it Friday yet? Wink, wink. Eye emoji. And Sasha Banks was doing it too. So it was kind of like, okay. And then just going back, like, so when I first got these pictures a year ago, like I didn't know who Sasha Banks was. And I was like, oh, this is weird. But when the first trailer dropped, I was like, oh shit, that's who this is. And so like everybody was like, oh, oh, is she a Jedi? Oh, is she Ahsoka? So I'm like, no, I can't tell you. Sworn to secrecy. How cool were they? Just so calm and collected.
What did you guys think about actually having Katie Sackhoff play Bo-Katan?
I mean, honestly, if anybody is going to continue a character that they played in the animated versions, I mean, Katie Sackhoff is perfect as Bo-Katan. Like, as much as we love Ashley as Ahsoka, like, I don't want to see live action Ahsoka as Ashley, or Ashley as live action Ahsoka. Like, I don't see Ahsoka in Ashley Eckstein, but like Bo-Katan is Katie Sackhoff, which again, I realize that sounds like Ashley Eckstein isn't Ahsoka, but like physicality, Katie Sackhoff is Bo-Katan.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it, Mike. I couldn't have worded it better, because Katie Sackhoff still kind of looks like the animated character. Like she really does. And it was cool seeing her Instagram where she was working out really hard and doing all these things to kind of get prepped for the role. And I think there was one discrepancy, but it's like one of those discrepancies that the fans didn't care about. It was like her age, I think.
Well, like, and I've been saying this too. She's like in her late 50s at this point, and it's hand waveable. Like, honestly, we notice it because we're super into Star Wars, but like the average person's not going to care.
Yeah, exactly. It could be one of those things where Yoda's species ages differently. We're seeing that with the child, so why not for the Mandalorians? Who knows? But I think it just made the character a lot more special. It's already exciting that Bo-Katan is appearing, but to have the actual voice actress doing it made it so much more exciting.
I think this is amazing. I love seeing Bo-Katan in a live action series like The Mandalorian, and I think this continuity between the Clone Wars versus The Mandalorian, I love it. It's like one big family, and I love all the tie-ins. This is good. But what I really like about this episode, guys, I think some of the shots are just beautiful. Like, just going to the cinematography of this stuff. I know we're probably going to talk about it later in this episode, but my God, there's a few things I want to hit right off the bat. Like the opening shot over the planet, like the moon planet, and then you kind of see, you think it's like a moonish planet, and then in the background it's like this earthish type planet, what happens to be where they spend most of the episode on. That's such a beautiful shot. And it kind of takes me back to some of the Apollo missions where actually we see the same angle over the moon to our own Earth. So there's that one. But there's also another space reference. Did you guys catch that? Like real space stuff. When they're falling through the atmosphere and they're losing control, and they're trying to aim for that barge, right? Okay, and they're panicking, and they're going to pin this landing. Doesn't that remind you of like a SpaceX rocket, like the booster landing?
Yeah, like I've watched enough sci-fi anime. Like, we don't really see ships in Star Wars make planet fall like that. Like, they always just kind of fly into the planet. They never do a full planet fall like this. That, and so like seeing that kind of, I want to say it was for the first time. Like, the only other main time I could think of is when General Grievous's ship in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, like when that breaks apart and half of the ship flies into Coruscant, and we see that kind of heat, re-entering the atmosphere kind of look. I don't think we ever see that anywhere else.
Does that mean that this was also a happy landing?
So speaking of that landing, so I follow a lot of animation people on Twitter, And one of the tweets I saw was it was like only CGI artists understand how big of a flex this was, and it took me a minute because obviously I'm not a CGI artist, but it was the shot of the AT-AT crane dropping the Razor Crest on the platform and how it just kind of bounced back and forth.
Oh wow!
And I didn't understand like why that was such a flex until I was reading all the comments, and it's because it's impossible to properly convey weight in CG because it's nothing. It's pixels. It's not a real object. It has no weight. So to convey weight in animation like that, very hard, especially in CG. And that was so believable that it looked like it was like a model that they dropped with the way the water even just sloshed out of the turbines. So like when you go back and like watch that shot technically, like with a technical eye, it's really cool.
I'm going to do that because I think even with Avengers Endgame, I kind of complained that Thanos didn't look like he had some weight when he would walk. So that's like something, I would normally notice. So I totally want to go see that again. Thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah. No, but that also just kind of shows you like how much ILM is on top of their game. Even without a full movie budget, like they're doing essentially a TV show. But I mean, the fact that they could pull that off on a TV show budget. Granted, this is again Disney Plus. Yeah, it's their highest, most popular show. I mean, yeah, like it looked so good just the way it bounced. And I mean, and going back, there's a bunch of other shots like like Joel said, like cinematography wise, like this is an excellent shot. Like the Imperial cruiser taking off and like how and it's that wide shot from behind of the ship like lifting up over the harbor.
Oh yeah,
I was like. Oh, like that is such a good shot. Like I said that watching the episode, I was like, man, that's cool. Well, and then the four Mandos flying in behind it.
I do want to say because it was Bryce Dallas Howard who directed this episode. Now, compared to her first season episode, I think it was a little bit rough as far as the cut was, where they cut certain scenes. However, there was some beautiful shots in that first episode that she did. Now, I do see that she's gained some experience quickly, but I do think it was the cinematographer, but I think she's got a great eye because there were some really, really cool shots. Another one to throw in there, too, was when they actually blow up the barge and you see the 3 rockets, blasting off in the background with, Din watching it. That was a great, great shot. So I'm glad you brought that up, Joel, because there was some beautiful shots in this.
With that shot you just mentioned right there, it's at the sunset, right? So that's a great background. And the pirates / sailors, it's their sunset because they died. So also I want to mention the fact that how cool is it that we actually saw like a fishing village in Star Wars? Right? Yeah, like you see bits of fishing villages and things like, I don't know, Popeye. Maybe the Jaws. That's about it. It doesn't really actually. You don't see a lot of fishing villages in their films, right?
In 2020,
that's amazing. I know.
Unironically, I love the Popeye movie.
I do too. I love that movie.
Oh man, if only the retro convo was still around.
I know, right?
No, you're right. Like I love seeing like this type of kind of everyday stuff in Star Wars, like we're so used to Coruscant and like other extremes like Tatooine that it's kind of just nice to see a normal village kind of atmosphere, and like it was like a neat port town.
Yeah, and the guys are wearing like sweaters, like knitted sweaters.
Yeah,
straight from Maine.
Yeah, like
Nova Scotia. Come on,
it's how ironic, that the Mon Cala are fishermen.
Yeah,
it kind of reminded me of the KOTOR games, and I don't know why. I guess it was just because you see in that kind of stuff like really diverse locations. Yeah, and that's sort of what it reminded me of. It was something that we don't usually get.
Yeah, there's a lot of Manon from KOTOR. Like Manon was a very Star Trek-esque location, but it was very like it was very in tune with the sea. Like once you got under essentially all the cleanness, like you kind of see that what this town looks like. So I mean, yeah, no, you're exactly right. Like it's I don't know, I lost my train of thought there.
All right, I'm chomping at the bit here because I know Mike wanted to throw out the Katie Sackhoff thing and Bo-Katan appearing in this episode, but one of the things I wanted to bring up too was the explanation of helmet removal and the weight this episode had with that. Mm-hmm. I think it was pretty cool to kind of include, especially people who've watched the Clone Wars, the different factions, and even that he's part of the cultish type of Mandalorian faction. And that was a good explanation for why he doesn't remove his helmet, but yet we saw it in the Clone Wars, helmet removals left and right like it was Christmas. So I think they handled that really, really well in this episode.
Do you think that means that later on in the series, he's going to have his helmet off more?
I think by the end of the series, maybe. Hand Emery on Twitter, who I just love, Libya Liberty on Twitter. She's going through the show for the first time right now, and she got to this episode, and her tweet today just fully put it into perspective for me. She was like, season 3, episode 2, here we learn that there are Sunni Mandalorians and Shia Mandalorians, and I was just like, oh my god, it's essentially she's right.
Season 2, episode 3. You mean you said it the opposite way?
I quoted her. So
got it.
She put it wrong. So. You can go find the tweet; it's there. But you're right. No, season 2, episode 3. But she, it just made me think for a second. I was like, oh yeah, like it's essentially that. She says apparently different sects have different rules about their holy garbs. Some say steel face veil is mandatory, while others have a fatwa allowing the steel niqab to be removed. And it's like, yeah, essentially that's what the Mando helmet is. So it was a neat perspective that, like, me, as a white dude, I don't have that perspective. I'm just kind of like, oh, Mando cool helmet, But it was neat to see that and kind of have that new world perspective that okay, I see what they're going on here.
Yeah, and it's just not just Islam, right? You find this orthodoxy versus more liberal tendencies in most major religions. It's just that there's always kind of like a counter reformation where you have to get back to the purity of things. Mm-hmm. The old ways of doing business, because somehow we've lost our path, and that's why we've lost our home world, or we've lost our standing in the world, or some bad things have happened and we have to reborn ourselves, right? Or we have to go back to the old ways of practicing. So yeah, that's a very apt analogy of what I think is happening in this series with the helmets of the Mandalorians. But it's just not different interpretation of Islam. It's more general than that.
I'm not saying this is that. I'm not saying like her opinion is 100% correct. It was just a real world example. I didn't.
Oh, consider. Absolutely. And I think it's cool.
But you're right. Like, and it really kind of shows how cultish that the Mandalorian, like different sects in Mandalorian culture can be. Because again, like, we've been asking this since the first season. How are they going to explain all the other Mandos taking off their helmet that forever that we've seen, and all of a sudden this is the way?
Yeah, because they're heretics.
And that's essentially it. Like, we got that confirmation that Death Watch is basically a cult.
Zealots.
And she didn't outright say Death Watch. She called it The Watch. So, and just because the words weren't there, I'm hesitant to say it was 100% Death Watch, even though they had the logo in the first season. But she called him The Watch. And then what I found interesting was when she kept saying this is the way to him, to Din, was she saying it condescendingly?
The first one was, for sure. Yeah.
Because, at least the first one was, because her Mandalorian quote unquote religion, like her Mandalorian sect, has never said that. As far as we know, she has never said that. I think Star Wars explains that there were about 4 hours of Bo-Katan in Clone Wars Rebels and before this. And she's never said this is the way. They've never said this is the way before this show.
Right.
So it at least the first time she says it condescendingly.
Yeah, totally. I do think the last one was very, very genuine. It seemed more like she was more on board.
Each other.
Yeah.
I think they respect each other enough at that point that she's like, all right, he's not so bad. I'm still not going to fully believe that this is the way, but it is what it is.
But I think that's what the show is starting to kind of show us a little bit, is that Din is learning that people have honor in different ways, not just in Mandalorian culture, but, you know, he's learning that people are people, you know, and he's learning to actually interact with them because, you know, he's kind of I don't want to say robot, but he does something that he's being told to do, right, for money and you know, for the better of his clan. But now that he's bumped into Katie Sackhoff, I think he's starting to question himself a lot more. And I do want to point out too that this episode, I think, really does instill why the Empire had so much fear of the Mandalorians, because 4 of them took down an Imperial ship full of stormtroopers and captains like it was nothing. And even when they got trapped, I mean, they still found a way to do it. And even on the time crunch, man, this did put some weight onto how awesome Mandalorians are and how feared they are as warriors. I mean,
think about how all of those stormtroopers were shitting themselves when Din is towards them as they're shooting at him. And he's carrying all the grenades. Like, if I'm a stormtrooper, I'm like, oh shit, this armor guy is.
They suddenly look like mud troopers.
Yeah, yeah, they suddenly look like mud troopers. But yeah, it really goes to show you like how cool Mandos are, and it's like I kind of get worried that sometimes like Mandalorians are kind of becoming the too cool to exist characters because they're kind of pulling off all of the cool shit. But it was still kind of cool to see that. And I haven't seen anybody talk about the guy that was with them. Like, everyone talks about Sasha Banks and Katie Sackhoff. Nobody talks about Salt and Pepper Daddy, Axe Woves. You know, he was cool too.
Dude, he was great. He looked awesome.
I really liked his armor. Granted, again, he didn't do much. You know, this was kind of Katie Sackhoff's episode. I mean, to have him on the official Mandalorian poster that Disney Plus released.
Yeah.
You know, that was really kind of cool too.
And, you know, bringing up Sasha Banks again, now, by now, most people should know that Sasha Banks is actually a WWE wrestler. You know, I was explaining right before we hit record that I love Sasha Banks as a presence in WWE. And I'm glad they didn't give her a lot of speaking lines in this, but she did look cool as hell posing. I even like the weird braid thing she had going on in the front of her forehead. But I think the 3 of them standing together in that poster and just even throughout the episode, they looked so good. So good.
I'm looking on Wikipedia, and they also don't outright say that it's Death Watch.
Yeah, it's all saying the Watch.
The article says Children of the Watch. And nowhere on there does it mention Death Watch.
Another thing too, I do like that Bo-Katan's character seemed to be a little bit more desperate in this episode too. You know, the changing of the plans and how she, you know, switched that on Din in the middle of an attack kind of just shows where she's at mentally.
I honestly thought that she was going to appear as a flashback to how she lost the Darksaber rather than her being, you know, in the modern time dealing with it.
Do you like that it wasn't a flashback though?
I like that it wasn't a flashback because it does mean that we'll get to see her again most likely. And I'll save it for later because it gets me to think about how this is going to go for her. But I do like that she was in the modern time. Like,
yeah,
I think flashbacks are cool, but they have to be done kind of like in a cool way and not too long. Like, I don't want a flashback to be more than a couple of minutes. Like how they did Cobb Vanth's flashback in episode 1 and the flashback to how Din got, you know, saved by the Watch. Like that, those kind of flashbacks. Like, I think would be cool. But I don't want to see one that's the entire story of the Purge. Does that make sense? Like, I get like everybody wants to see the Purge, but I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I think that's too heavy of a subject to include, and let's say like a 10-minute flashback.
It's not even that it's too heavy. It's just it just feels like something we don't need to see. It feels like something we can just kind of be like, the Empire wiped us all out.
Yeah.
And we already know the most important person who was there at the Purge, Bo-Katan. We already know she survived.
Yeah, I agree.
So like we don't need to see that again.
I will say too, another thing that, there's so many points on this episode to bring up, but last week we were talking about how a slower episode does bring out character in Din. I do feel like this episode, without it really being so heavy, put a lot of weight on Din's character as incredibly important in the future, if it is going the way that I think it's going. If he's going to be somehow involved in Bo-Katan getting her Darksaber back, just so she can lead the Mandalorian people back to the planet and get their society going again. I think if it goes that way, Din's character just all of a sudden became a heavy character and important, because as of right now, he's just kind of the guy who's taking up, what he can do. So the only thing he can do right now is just try to find a Jedi for the child. Or, even before that was just all bounties. But now I think he's incredibly important.
I think that is where it's going to go. And granted, we're only on episode 3, so I don't know if this is going to happen this season or next season. But we know Bo-Katan is going to have to meet up with Moff Gideon at some point, because he knows about her. Like, obviously, whether or not he knows it was her, like she was one of the Mandalorians who took over this ship, is I think that's up for debate. But I think we're going to get to a point either this season or later where those two are going to confront each other, and I think Bo-Katan is going to die. I think she's going to be killed, and I think Din is going to take up the Darksaber. I think the show is just building towards that.
Whoa!
and he's going to be the Mandalorian.
That's crazy. That's a good theory, though.
It's a hero arc. Like, he's basically a kid who started with nothing because his parents were killed, and it's opening him up now because he's learning about the different Mandalorians now. He just got opened up to that to the other sex with Bo-Katan. Cobb Vanth, not a Mandalorian, but enough that Din respects him enough that maybe he could be a Mandalorian. I like to think that he questioned whether or not he should keep that armor or not. But I think eventually, I think we're going to get to that point where it's gonna, whether or not it's, like I said, whether or not it's this season or the series finale or what, I think Din is going to be the Mandalore, and he's going to take up the Darksaber. Whether or not he wants to, that's another thing. I think he's going to pick it up, and everyone's going to be like, "Oh shit, this is our guy."
I kind of wonder, like, I kind of disagree. Not saying that your theory is bad, but it's more of like, well, what do I really want to see? And I would almost rather him sort of get to that point where he has to like make that decision, and then sort of remain in the background, because that's something that we really don't see a lot with Star Wars. We don't have these character-focused stories where they end up becoming just, a secondary or background character, like after their story is over. So I think it'd be like a nice change of pace.
I agree. I personally, I don't want what I just threw out there to happen. I just, in my gut, with Filoni and Favreau doing this, and in my gut, that is where I see it going. But to be honest, I would love to see, like you said, him getting put in that position and just being like, nah, bye, peace.
Yeah.
And then just going back to bounty hunting, and then hopefully taking the kid with him.
Yeah, so you see him almost like a quasi-religious prophet type, maybe like a Joan of Arc, right? Getting the sword as a symbol of like a divine right to rule almost. Yeah, there's different ways you can spin this story, but I can see where you're getting at, Mike. And maybe. I'm not sure if I would be into it or not, but it's definitely
it's not a bad arc.
Right.
It just feels like it's very hero's journey-ish.
Yeah.
He's going along the way. And, yeah.
I mean, well, they are throwing some moments too where he's developing sort of a leadership character, and not to steal thunder, for myself, but Alex from Star Wars Explained also mentioned something that popped in my head right now, was that he got Tusken Raiders and villagers who did not like each other to come together and fight this creature. So they're kind of getting him, these leadership moments where I don't think he's seeking that, but he's good at it. He's naturally good at it, and it's coming out more and more as his character develops, and he's not following, or he's not even around his clan anymore. He's kind of just on his own on this journey where he's discovering himself and discovering other Mandalorians.
His confidence is being built up over time through experience. He's in some ways shares the same DNA as Han Solo, but more of a military aspect than, say, a smuggler aspect of things, right? But you're right. The characters are developing very similarly, if that's a word. Similarly, okay?
Similarly.
Thank you very much. And just before, I just want to interject there for 1 second, because we kind of went way over this. But can we just take a moment to see how great it was, the dedication of the Imperial Officer Corps with the captain of the ship, making the right but harsh decisions for the betterment of the Empire. Yeah, that's dedication, right there.
That's Mike's. That's Mike's realm right there.
It was cool to kind of see Moff Gideon, like, what you have to do, like, and the captain of the ship, like, shooting the pilots and then trying to sink it himself. I did think the electric suicide tooth was a little much.
Yeah, it really bites.
I get it. It just, that seemed a little too much.
It was. It reminded me of Captain America: The First Avenger, where it's like, somewhat a little bit of satire, but it was a dark moment.
Captain America, it made sense because, like, the guy was a spy.
Right. Exactly. It just reminded me of that scene, though.
This just felt weird because it was like, huh? So. Yeah, I don't know. That one just felt weird, because then it opens up, like I said, like the one in Captain America, like, that's a spy thing, but like this guy's he's just a captain. He's not a spy. Like, we don't even know how many details he's been in. Like, he might have just gotten the rank of captain because he was good at filing paperwork. Why would he need an electric suicide capsule? Why would any Imperial officer need an electric suicide capsule? Especially at this point,
the Empire
is such like the Empire is in such disarray that it's like, where do they have the credits to pay for all these electric suicide capsules?
Yeah, but they're dealing with the Mandalorians, right? Who are raiding their ships all the time. If you're dealing with a fearsome enemy like that, like the Mandalorians, I can see it.
Right. I got that. I don't know. Like I said, it just seems weird in a show about aliens and space wizards. It just felt weird. That was the point of too far for me.
I think it's a good thing which we can sink our teeth into. Yeah.
All right, moving. All right. And so, since we're at the end of the episode, like, we got our next big name drop. So Ahsoka, and we know where she is, or we know where Bo-Katan last saw her. What do you guys think? We're gonna get Ahsoka probably this season. I don't think it'll be this next episode.
Well, did we see her at the very beginning of this episode?
No.
On the docks? Or was that someone else wearing the hood?
No, that was Sasha Banks.
Was it Sasha Banks?
Yeah.
Okay. That's right. I missed that. But okay.
No, a lot of people thought it was her when the trailer first came out.
All right.
But,
okay.
I've got some thoughts about this whole Ahsoka thing. So I don't know if you want me to go first.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, all right, just some preface. I've not really seen much of Clone Wars. I've seen all of Rebels. I like Ahsoka as a character. I did see the last season of Clone Wars. I know, like, how that ended, and I thought it was wonderful. But not saying it's going to happen, nor do I want it to happen, but I hope that this doesn't overshadow what The Mandalorian has been up to this point. And I kind of have a hunch that might happen. I don't want it to happen. I think that when she first got introduced in Rebels, at least to me, that sort of took away a little bit of what Rebels was trying to do. And, we eventually accumulated with her fighting Darth Vader, which was a big moment. And I mean, that was sort of a continuation of, everything we saw in Clone Wars anyway. But I don't know. I don't mind it really, but I don't want it to become the thing. And that's one thing that kind of irked me about the Bo-Katan thing, is that it's, obviously, she's a Mandalorian, so it's more crucial to have her in the show than it would be Ahsoka, and it makes more sense. But I don't want this to become another, like, the Ahsoka show featuring the Mandalorian or something to that effect. Like, if she's in 1 or 2 episodes and then either gets rid of the child, or I honestly kind of think she's going to die somehow, and then that's how the child stays with the Mandalorian, that'd be fine. But I don't want it to overshadow what the series has been up to this point and what it's trying to tell, because it's not the child's show, it's the Mandalorian, and I don't want to take something away from that development just to focus on Ahsoka at this point.
I think you're right. Like, I mean, a lot of us don't want Ahsoka to overshadow Mando, and I don't think they will, because this isn't a Dave Filoni show. Like, Dave Filoni's working on this show, but this isn't his show. So, one, that's kind of why I don't think she's going to be in this next episode, because Carl Weathers is directing it. There's no way Dave Filoni is not directing live action Ahsoka's first episode. No way that's not happening.
Yeah, I think he's the one after.
Yeah, like, he's gonna, like, Dave's gonna direct her debut.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, you're right, and this also kind of has to line up with what she's doing at this point. Is she looking for Ezra with Sabine, or has she even contacted Sabine yet at this point? Because going back to Rebels, we don't know when that after scene, that epilogue scene where Ahsoka gets Sabine and they go looking for Ezra. We don't know how far after Empire is. So if we're 5-7 years after Return of the Jedi, are they on their quest right now? Are we also going to get Sabine? Or has that not happened yet? I've seen a lot of people talking about, like, oh, like, she's going to be with Sabine. And it's like, well, we don't know if she's with Sabine yet.
I think Sabine would make a lot more sense than having Ahsoka, at least in, like, the long run of the show.
Well, I mean, only because Sabine's also a Mandalorian, but, like, his quest right now is to find a Jedi. And at this time, Bo-Katan wouldn't know Luke, but she would know Ahsoka. It's also kind of interesting that Ahsoka has kept in touch with Bo-Katan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point, Chris. It's a really, really good point. And I think, if anything, this episode shows me that they can handle that really well. But, I mean, Ahsoka compared to Bo-Katan is night and day also.
I mean, like Ahsoka is she was the big 3 of Clone Wars.
Exactly.
The whole last season was pretty much her arc. Yeah. And granted, not the Bad Batch episodes, but it's just, Ahsoka is a huge deal, and I don't think they're gonna have her that much in this show.
Yeah, I don't.
There is also that talk that, like, this is going to be a backdoor pilot to an Ahsoka spinoff, which I don't really want either.
I think we're going to see her, definitely, because her name's been in the dialogue, right? So it's like Chekhov's gun, right? We just saw the gun. The gun's going to be pulled out.
Nobody's denying that we're not going to see her. Nobody's saying that we're not going to see her. It's just, how much of her are we going to see?
Yeah,
absolutely.
At the end of the day, like, this is the Mandalorian, and I think that's the way it's going to be. I think this is more just to settle the child thing. I wonder if he's going to keep the child, or eventually, train the child to be a Mandalorian. Because they've mentioned they could go either way, right? But I don't think they're going to make Ahsoka more than what she needs to be, which is perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, I think we're going to get. I mean, he's going to have to come to that choice that he made in the first season too. Like, do I give the kid to the people that ask for him or that need him, or do I act in my own interest because this kid is my family now? You know, they're because he's Clan Mudhorn. The child is part of Clan Mudhorn now. He's the reason there is a Clan Mudhorn.
Just the kind of lighthearted banter. I love the Mon Calamari thing that they had going on also. Because at the end of, you know, when he takes off in his ship and it just looks like it's been tacked on with shoelaces and glue.
Oh, it was all fishing nets. It was fishing nets and ropes, and like
I love that.
I loved that aesthetic.
That was so funny.
I was like, that looks pretty cool, and it looks exactly like something that somebody in a fishing village would do. Yeah, like that looks exactly like. Part of me was kind of like, because the Mon Cala tells him, like, he's like, I don't think I can fix that, and then Din only pays him 1,000 credits.
Yeah, do what you can. Did you see, by the way, that Janina, who played Iden Versio, kind of said something that she might have helped with the puppeteering for that character? I saw that in the list in the cast credits for the episode. She's uncredited, but it lists her as a puppeteer, and I was like, who did she do? Yeah, she said on Instagram. I didn't know if she was joking or not, but she had something to do with the eyes, which is kind of fun. You know, that's a little fun little Star Wars nod, I guess, to us fans who play the games too.
We didn't talk about him, but I also loved Mr. Frog. I thought the scene of the two of them waving to each other at opposite ends of the dock, that was the sweetest thing. And I wish them a happy and long life with all of their children.
By the way, just going back to the Razor Crest, the repairs, I think that's pretty much a net gain for the calamari.
There you are. There it is.
And on that note, guys, I think it is time for us to wrap up this episode. So you guys want to do number ratings? I thought this was a solid 8 out of 10.
Yeah, me too. I was about 8 out of 10.
Yeah, 8.5 for me. A little more. This was a nice episode.
I think it's 7.5 for me.
It's a Chris score there.
There's the French judge. All right, guys. Well, if you enjoy this show, head on over to Twitter and let us know. You can follow us on Twitter at Mando Night Pod. If you want to talk to us individually, you can hit me up on Twitter at It's the Rocketeer. That's ITS the Rocketeer. Joel, where can we find you?
I'm on Twitter at Joel_Welch, WELCH. I also have my own podcast called the Sci-Fi Pubcast, which I do with some folks, where we talk about general themes and properties in science fiction. Sci-Fi Pubcast.
And Chris.
I'm at The Curse of Chris.
And Ernest.
You can find me on Instagram at Your Buddy Ernie.
All right, guys, and then tune in next week for Chapter 4, directed by Carl Weathers. Again, I think it's going to be an interesting episode, but we'll see.